This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. G'day everyone and welcome back to Basket Case Clubs. It is my pleasure to be with you again today. My name's Michael Connolly and I'll be your host on this journey of basket casey goodness, and joining me as usual is Steve Connolly. G'day Steve.
Once again, I will be hosted. Basket case goodness.
Oh, it's always wonderful wondering what you're going to come up with. I kind of cringe sometimes thinking, is this going to be G-rated still, or are we going to have some little explicit warning based on what Steve's going to come up with today? But no, you're always an absolute gentleman, Steve. Well done.
Yes, for those of you who know us, you know how bad of a liar Michael is.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Being a bad liar is a good thing. It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. So it means you can tell if I'm doing it.
Yep.
And if you can't tell I'm doing it, I'm not doing it. So just trust me.
Yes.
Everything I say is right and true.
And for those of you who know us really well and don't just listen to us but have seen our faces in real life, you'll know when Michael's bullshitting you because he's got what we call he's got joke face. Sometimes it's dad joke face. That's a bigger tell.
If I'm doing it for my kids.
If you're doing it for your kids, but yeah.
It's so hard though when I'm telling a real story. Like I've just learned something fascinating about engineering. You know, in the world of engineering, I've learned how bridges stay up magically. And I'll be explaining it and I'll be starting to tell this story, and you see that they cross their arms and they nod their head to the side and they roll their eyes a little bit and they say, "You've got joke." No, this is serious. This is that. Yep. Okay. And then I tell them, and when there's no punchline, they go, "Oh, oh." And it's like they're bored by science and facts.
So it's a little like the boy who
jokes.
A little like the boy who cried wolf, but it's the dad who joke faced.
The dad who cried joke face. Oh, anyway, let's get into our ultimate episode on AGMs, and this one is about the AGM.
Yay!
The AGM is the penultimate step, but it's our ultimate episode. The ultimate episode. I wonder if Jess is going to put that in the title. The ultimate episode, the AGM. No, it's probably not got a good ring to it. Everyone's going to go, ultimate AGM, like, ew.
Well, it could for a club. You don't want to have your ultimate AGM because it probably means it's your last.
Yes, well, that's what ultimate means in this context.
Mm-mm.
So, where are we up to, Steve? What have we done so far? I'm going to let you do the recap. See how good your memory is.
Oh, don't do that to me. It's the morning and I haven't had enough coffee. Oh dear. No, look, I better do so, given that I'm going to be presenting our upcoming webinar, all about AGM prep and facilitation and follow-up. So we've been through the process of planning and preparing your AGM, making sure your financial statements are ready on time and ideally able to be distributed to your members prior to the meeting to give them time to read over them, review them, come up with any questions for discussion at your AGM. Been through the nomination process for management committee members. The election process we touched on, I think, last episode, that some clubs actually complete prior to their AGM and then just make the declaration regarding those elected at the meeting. That is still not the most common approach, and a lot of clubs like to follow the ceremonial process of electing their management committee at their AGM. So,
and also because it's easier.
And also because it's easier and
do it once.
And you can manage the fact that you might not get any written nominations and have to get people to stick their hand up or have their hand stuck up for them at the AGM. And we've let people know who who is nominated for each management committee position. So we've done that in the lead up to the meeting as well. We've gone through the process.
Hey, I had a question for you. This one comes up all the time. In what order should the list of nominations be displayed?
Well, I often say I need to answer this carefully because there is no one right way, I believe. But the most common approach is that it'll go from president to general position. So, for instance, if a club has a president, a vice president, secretary or treasurer, might be in either order. Then there might be other broad committee positions or general committee or board positions that will typically be elected after those. I get the sense this is a loaded question. So why don't I say to you, what do you recommend when you're asked that question all the time?
I do get asked that question a lot, and I wasn't talking about the order of positions either. So nice dodge there, Steve. I was talking about the order of candidates. So when you're displaying the list of candidates, in what order should the candidates be displayed? And
I can answer that question.
Yes, not must, knowing what you said, that there's no prescribed
right
way.
In answer to this question that you actually asked and not the one that I thought you asked or heard.
Nice politicking there, Steve.
Yes.
You ever thought of running for election?
No.
Yeah, I've thought about it.
I've
thought about how much it ain't going to happen. Wouldn't that be funny if then I run for politics or something and somebody comes back and finds episode, whatever number this is.
You said you were never going to run
for election, so it's illegal for you to run for election. I didn't say election for what people?
There would be people. There would be people who would say just that. So, a lot of constitutions specify that this order be determined by lot, so that it's actually kind of a draw from a hat. In other instances, it'll be in alphabetical order.
And in some cases, it might be the order received. People might choose to display them in the order that the nominations were received.
Yep. So what do you normally say? Look at your constitution in the first instance.
Yeah, look at your constitution. But my preference is still to do it randomly, because there's going to be even if it's subconscious, there's going to be some level of bias towards the person at the top of the list. So I think that everybody should have an equal chance of being in that position. So I reckon a draw from a hat. So randomly determine the order for each. And when we say draw from a hat, I typically don't actually get a hat and put people's names on a slip of paper.
In your sweaty hat.
An online random generator and put my names in and say, give me the list. And it goes, boop, done.
Draw from a virtual hat.
Yes. Yes, draw from a virtual hat using a keyboard. Sorry, I interrupted you there to touch on a little thing that it comes up. What order should we put them in? So
yes,
random's my favorite.
Or probably of more concern is when it doesn't come up and they just keep doing whatever they've always done, which isn't necessarily the right approach to take.
Yeah, like putting the incumbent first.
Yes,
which gives them an unnecessary advantage.
Absolutely, unless if there's another good reason for them to be first. For instance, if they are alphabetically first, if that's prescribed in the
Aaron
Constitution.
Ardvarkson.
Or if they come out of the virtual hat. And this is particularly
by the way, if we have a listener named Aaron Ardvarkson, we'd love to hear from you.
We would love to.
If you're a president of some Basket Casey club.
Or show Casey.
Yeah.
So, and this is
for you.
This order of candidates is particularly important if you're going to go down the path of a ballot paper, either virtual or
on the ballot.
physical.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And look, the online tools that I think I mentioned in our third episode of the mini-series, well, you can do that automatically. You just put them in and say, in what order do you want them? And you say randomized. Well, some of them are so clever that it shows up randomly differently for each person that logs in to vote as well.
Yes. Yeah, I was just going to make that point. Yeah. Cool.
Oh, sorry, I keep taking the wind out of your sails, don't I? I'll shut up and you can finish the recap.
Okay, I'm really good at remembering where I was up to. So
I think we got up to displaying the nominations.
Good. And then, so proxy forms, we covered those, I think, in the last episode, talking through some of the important considerations that often feature in the discussions that we have with organisations that are considering keeping them in, getting rid of them, if they're going to, offer the opportunity for people to participate in their meetings virtually, so not have to turn up physically, then, what bearing does that have on the necessity or otherwise for proxy forms? And sending out the final reminder, a day before, but also I've skipped over an important step, which is one that you touched on, which is ensuring that you've actually booked your venue for the meeting, particularly if you don't have a physical presence as an organisation, ensuring that you've got somewhere locked in that's appropriate, going to be sufficient in size to accommodate all of the members that might turn up, and, scheduled any food or catering that you might wish to provide after the meeting. But if you're going to have your AGM somewhere that has a bar, close the meeting before you open the bar, because that has given rise to some very colourful AGMs in our experience.
Let me just tell you something. So I've been a member of this club for for a long time, and I just want to take a few moments, if I can, to tell you how much I love you guys. Talk about a celebration of the year that's just passed.
Yeah, not that they're going to remember it.
No, but
No, how did I go? Did I?
I think you
cover
did good. I think
most
you
things?
did good. So that takes us up to the big day, the AGM day. So now you've got to actually go and do it all. If you've done your preparation well, then your AGM should actually go pretty well. Before we run through, and look, I don't think we need to run through all of the things in detail that you might do at the AGM, but what we might do is run through the things that I think you should do at the AGM. So your agenda should be fairly simple, and you can muck around with this as you like, but definitely when you join the webinar, you'll see that we'll have some pretty cool downloads available for you at the webinar. So, some templates and some things that will actually give you some further ideas. But you want to open the meeting, you want to thank everyone for being there, you want to do an acknowledgement of country. You want to then start celebrating the year that's been. So you might have had some pretty shitty times. It's not necessarily a great opportunity to start saying, "Oh my God, woe is us. We're going to die very soon as a club, and we're not going to be here next year." Look, if there's always something to celebrate. There might be some little wins. I'm not talking about wins on the field. There might be some wins. You might have done well as far as grants go. You might have done well as far as some of your marketing initiatives go. You might have done well as far as getting some projects completed, whether those projects are building things, buying things, or running new programs. So there's always something to celebrate. And if failing all of those things, there are always people to celebrate. And I think that's a really important thing that you can do at your AGM to give value to people who turn up. And just so you know, if there's one thing that's going to make your meeting go long that I would be supportive of for an AGM, it would be that you mention every single person that has done anything for the club, because to any person, their own name is the sweetest sound in the universe. That sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? I should write a book about that. Then I might be able to win friends and influence people. So it's really a great opportunity to do that, to celebrate the people who have given up their time purely because they love what you do. They love your sport, they love your club, they love you guys. So celebrate them. See what I did there? The little throwback. And then obviously you've got the money stuff. So a lot of the musts in an AGM are the money stuff. So you've got to do your financial report. And that includes if you've got an audit done, so the auditor's report as well, or if there's an external or internal person who needs to verify that those financial statements are true and accurate, that you're presenting that as well, and then open that up for questions. If you do have an auditor, this is the time that they're appointed, because as a member-driven organisation, the members make the important decisions, like who's going to be our external person that verifies that our approach to financial management is good, is meeting accounting standards. And obviously,
I just want to really quickly jump in there, because I think we have touched on this in a previous episode, but there is often a misconception, because regardless of the type of organisation you are, incorporated, association in a state or territory, or a company limited by guarantee, or an Aboriginal corporation, there will typically be different thresholds, different financial reporting thresholds, which dictate, as you just touched on, whether you might need a full audit or whether you might simply need a verification statement prepared by an accountant, auditor, or approved person, or if someone internally can do that verification to essentially say, I hereby declare that the financial statements present a true and accurate record of our financial position. Regardless of your reporting threshold and the nature of the verification, audit, or otherwise that you've got to have done for your financials, you've still got to report back to your regulatory authority and to your members.
Yeah.
So the AGM is the opportunity to present to your members your financial position and history for the past 12 months. But it's also imperative that you submit your annual reporting document, whatever that might be called, to your regulatory authority.
Yeah,
so
very often an annual return.
Very often an annual return. Yep.
Guess how often it happens, Steve?
I'm going to leave that up to the listeners to guess.
Yeah. Here's some thinking music for you. Yes. Yeah, so the money stuff is really important. And that member-driven thing, and that's why I went to members first before regulatory body, is because you're accountable to members. That it's our members who, and they need to hold us to account. They need to make sure that we're doing things right. So when it comes time to do the money stuff at the AGM, expect discussion. I would even go so far as to say push for it.
Yep.
It's so funny. I sat in an AGM one year, and when you get those looks on your faces that you think I should be hiding this look, but I just can't hide it. When you're going,
yeah.
This
For those of you who are just listening, Michael is pulling a carnival clown face.
Yes, gaspy emoji. So in this AGM that I sat in one year, I made that face and may have even made a bit of a gasp when nobody asked questions until I prompted some conversation. Nobody asked questions about financial statements where there was a loss in the order of $100,000.
Whoa.
The financial statements showed a six-figure loss. It's in brackets, it's red, it's got a big minus sign in front of it. To me, that's we got to do something here. This is significant.
And it might be explainable. It might be the case that we've, had a grant come in last year and we've spent it this year, and therefore we had a $100,000 profit last year and a $100,000. But bloody talk about it.
Ask about it. Oh, and look, it was something like that. There were some things that had gone wrong, and some changes in finance. So I think even a change in the chart of accounts. All those. But nobody asked anything. They were just going to sit there and nod and put their hands up and accept it without question.
Wow.
Want to know something really funny? The next year, they made a profit, and I remember the figure. It was $183,000 that they made a profit.
And did they talk about that?
They all bitched and moaned about why the fees were so high, and you've got all of this money that you're making. Why are you still charging? And this is an organization who at the time had completed a $16.5 million new facility, and the members who are the delegates from the clubs don't take their club hat off, and they're just bitching and moaning about how you're all making money. Oh my God.
How dare you run a successful business?
Yeah. And let's all bitch and moan when we're making money, but nobody says anything when we lose money. Wow. Seriously. And I'm sure that some of our listeners are driving along listening to this going, yeah, that's happened to me. It is so common. Ask freaking questions. Seriously, every time, what's good? What's bad? And the best questions to be pushing for at this level, and especially if you've submitted them beforehand so that the treasurer's had a chance, as we said last time, so the treasurer's had a chance to prepare, are the sorts of questions that stay at that strategic level. So you're not saying, look, I noticed that in this line item here of the chart of accounts, last year we made $684 and this year we made $912. Where's the difference then? Where's that come from? It's, what are we doing? Big picture. Be really clear on who we are. And this is then, so from strategy, you can see how our strategy is reflected in our financial performance and how our budget, what we're proposing to do next year, which is obviously largely based on how we did last year, looks at our strategy and is then linking, if we're going to need new money to run new programs or buy new things or engage new people, where's that money coming from? What are we doing from a business perspective to do that? These are the sorts of questions that are so meaningful. And for those of you listening and not watching it, I'm like Steve, I am gesticulating here big.
Can I just quickly add to this financial discussion? This is somewhat common in organisations where there are subsections within the club's membership. So there might be a junior cohort or a senior or veterans cohort or a ladies cohort. And if that cohort of membership have, for instance, a subcommittee that is afforded the privilege of managing their own money, and I do the little bunny ears gesticulation there to highlight the fact that it's club money. It's not money that belongs only to that little cohort of members. And this is where I'm going with this comment. It's just to be aware that if you do have some segmentation of the financial management within your organization, firstly, it's imperative that your board or management committee has oversight of what money is moving in and out of the organization, even within those little segments. But it's vital that that money be reported on your financial statements. And this is often overlooked. Often we've got clubs that have got these little sections within them, and just because it's how it's always happened, there's this subconscious assumption that we don't need to worry about that because that's money that's managed just by that little group.
Because
No,
it's a separate account. So out of
because
sight,
it's a
out of
separate
mind.
account. Exactly. Yeah. And often this leads into a larger discussion, which we won't go down this rabbit warren now because we're talking about AGMs, but this is critical for the purpose of financial statements and their presentation at your AGM. But it is often the case that that money is managed with a degree of autonomy from the board or management committee that is not okay. So if any of our listeners are at all concerned about this, get in touch with us because we're dealing with this all the time. It's just this incremental progression that leads to a situation where there's money that isn't showing up on the club's accounts and therefore not presented as part of the financial statements at the AGM. And that's for a range of reasons that we can talk with you directly about, not okay.
Yeah. So look, the only other big thing to talk about then is obviously the election. I think we've talked about that in the lead up. So again, if you're well prepared, if you've got your ballot papers prepared, if you've got an online voting system prepared, by the time you've got your nominations in, and that whole process of calling nominations a long time out, receiving nominations so that they're well and truly back, you've called the meeting well in advance of the minimum notice period of 14, 21, 28 days, whatever it is in your constitution or whatever is legislatively required. You've then got to just go through the motions and have the election. It's probably more complex if you don't have any nominations, and then you've got to check the constitution to see, do we take nominations from the floor or do we proceed with a casual vacancy? So, and as I'm thinking about this, Steve, I'm reminded of when we started the podcast. I think it was a Tuesday that we might have sat down with a glass of red wine virtually in the shutdown, zombie apocalyptic looking world of COVID, and said, look, we could probably, I reckon we should just do like episodes that are about 5 minutes, you know?
Yeah, that lasted for 0 episodes.
There are so many rabbit warrens when it comes to these things. And I'm thinking, we could do a whole mini-series on voting. We could do a whole mini-series on, no, I was going to say on the ballot paper, but let's not do that. But you can see that there's so much to think about that. The idea is that we share with you the crap that we've seen basket case clubs get themselves into so that you don't. That's the idea of the podcast, is that so that you can listen to these things, chuckle along with us, but then do things differently so that you're not in that situation. So if you're well prepared, and if you're literally, and we've got another mini series coming. I don't know how many parts this one's going to be, but we're going to do a mini series on the transition and the handover and succession, because it's just such a fret for people. They just worry so much about it. And the funny thing is that they worry about it, but they don't do anything about it. So there are some simple steps that you can take. And this is exactly one of them. So if you have done your job in trying to replace yourself, so now I'm talking to the committee or board members, trying to replace yourself while you're there, but then when it comes time to actually engage with somebody whom you can actually literally tap on the shoulder and say, hey, I reckon you'd be great at, by the time you get there, there's no surprises. You've done your job well. You've tried to obsolesce yourself really quickly, knowing that management committee and board members are only the short-term stewards of a club. It's not your club. Never was, never will be. You are only the short-term stewards. So it's really important that you work out a way to be able to step back when the time is right. And when that happens, you've then got people ready to take over. And if that means a contested election every year because you've got people who want the job, awesome. Like so many times, it would be a massive percentage of the more than 10,000 clubs that we've worked with that have not had a contested election for a decade or more, just because it's just rolling along. And is that the healthiest way to run a democracy? Not sure. So after the meeting, obviously during the meeting you keep your minutes, but after the meeting, it's a good idea to get them out quickly and not sit on them for a year. And
yeah.
The start of the next AGM.
I can't remember what happened last week, let alone last year, to try and review minutes and confirm. Yep, these are accurate, true and accurate record of the meeting.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, but it was enchiladas and it was spectacular. Nah, Steve. So the thing about
I hope you had too much chili and you regret it today.
That one goes through to the keeper. So the minutes of your AGM don't need to be a full transcript, especially as you said last time, if you've presented the president's report, the treasurer's report, any other committee, subcommittee reports, any other operational position reports, because there it is. And what I love is when clubs get to the point of sophistication that they've actually got an annual report. And it's not just the financials. You don't need to print it. You know, we're dealing in a world that we don't like just chopping down trees and printing glossy paper for the purpose of chucking it straight in the bin. So you can do beautiful, glossy, to be consumed on a phone or a tablet or a computer annual reports that look great really quickly, really simply, just using an online tool. Even if you don't have somebody who's a whiz-bang graphic designer in the club, you don't need to spend money on it, but it means that it just demonstrates such a high level of value. And it means that people aren't going to the AGM because they have to make up numbers just to meet quorum. They're going to the AGM because they want to. They want to be informed and they want to be part of this celebration. And if they've got questions, if you've got contentious things going on, you know, I said don't launch into them at the start, but if you've got to deal with them with confidence and demonstrate that you've got solutions coming up, and that even if the current committee is going to be voted, and listen to me talking like we live in a beautiful utopian society, even if the current committee is going to be voted out, you're handing over a solution, not just a big bunch of problems. And we should probably mention quorum, Steve. I don't think we've mentioned quorum. Make sure you get it. Quorum is the minimum number of people who must be present before a meeting can proceed to business.
And typically speaking, proxies count towards the quorum.
Really good point. If you've got them, unless stated otherwise, they count towards quorum, which is interesting because then you get people getting one of these looks on their faces, huh?
Yeah.
Where they're saying, hang on a minute, so that means that one person could turn up with 14 proxies and run the meeting? Well, look, if you're getting one person, I'd say that smells funny, so don't do it. But you want enough people in there so the discussion happens, but proxies do count. And these are all the sorts of things. Don't leave until the day of the AGM to be having these discussions. Have these discussions nice and early so you know what's coming up.
That's the biggest trap, isn't it? And I think just quickly a note that we, as we've touched on, I think a couple of times through this mini-series, which actually is a mini-series as opposed to our previous mega-series, that we do run AGMs. So we can come in and make this process really bloody easy for you. If you're at all concerned, just get in touch, whether it's us providing support and mentoring behind the curtain or actually coming in and just running the meeting, having someone...
And acting as returning officer to make sure the elections all happen by the book. Yep.
And having someone or some people there who can confidently facilitate the meeting always injects an air of comfort and confidence amongst attendees, whereas otherwise it might be somewhat uncomfortable and anxious.
Yeah, I always love the conversation, and it can be online too. We don't actually physically need to be there, but it's amazing the amount of times after we've been at an AGM that we've been called in quite late, you know, so the proverbial's already hit the fan before we've been invited along, which is sometimes why we've been invited along. And the people who come up to us afterwards and say, oh my God, this would have been an absolute shit show if you guys weren't here. Thank you so much for being here. We'd still be here in a year. And just to see the fact that, you know, just having somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about there means that those people who are otherwise going to try it on, you know, the bush lawyers that we talk about, Steve, they are either going to be kept in check, or when they do ask a question, they're put into a position where they've got to ask the right question or ask the question in the right way. So they don't turn into assholes. They don't turn into little dictators. and we can make sure that we're making them ask the right question, which sounds really weird, but, you know, sometimes the question never happens. It's just a chance for them to rant. But when a meeting is well chaired, it's, hey, get to the point, man. You know, there's people have got other places to be. So in wrapping up the whole thing about the AGM, I would like to say, if you are shit scared leading up to the AGM, and if you're really scared about getting it wrong, then there's a good chance it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If, on the other hand, you prepare well, and it's not hard to prepare. Okay, it takes a little bit of time, but you're far better off spending that time beforehand, because if you have to mop up shit afterwards, it's going to take a lot longer and be a lot less comfortable. If you're well prepared, you've done that preparation, you followed the steps that we've got here and the steps that we'll run through on the 10th of October at our webinar, 12:30 p.m. Brisbane time, then you'll feel comfortable. So if you're going into the AGM with a smile on your face and people are arriving and you've got so you being the committee people, you've got a smile on your face, they're going to go, oh, okay, well, this is going to be okay. So even if there's some hard stuff to talk about, even if we're going to have a contested election, you're confident that the process is going to be right. You might get your ass handed to you in the election, but at least the process is right. And it's like a game of football. When I'm watching a game of junior football, it's kind of, oh, that was a great game. But there's, 50% of the players are totes devoed. 50% of the players are happy that they won. So yeah, it's separate the people part of the problem from the process so that you can focus on the process and get the process right, at least, because then that softens all of the emotional stuff that might go with it if there's a contested election. Recognizing that in most times it's not. It's thanks for coming. These people have put their hands up. These people are elected. Let's open the bar or put some jam and cream on those scones. So you look like you want to say something.
I was just going to say, or sausages in that bread.
I've got such a soft spot for scones, and the best AGMs. You like your soft spot for Lamington fingers.
Yep.
My soft spot for jam and cream on scones. Like I don't normally eat dessert, but sometimes I have scones for dinner. If there's an opportunity I literally did that when we were in Melbourne at the start of the year. It was so good. A little cafe up in Olinda where I grew up as a tiny little kid. Anyway, so this is the final call out for all of those who are listening live to this. Listening in real time, I need to say. Only you and me are listening live. Suck it, Steve. You're going to listen live. So yes, if you're listening in real time, then register for our webinar on Tuesday, the 10th of October. It's a lunchtime webinar, Brisbane time, 12:30 p.m. But obviously the platform, it'll tell you what time it is in your time, wherever you are. And even if I think that you might make it or you might not, register anyway, because then you'll get notified when the recording's available. And what I want you to do with that recording is to have it up your sleeve so you can come back to it later. And it will be, I made the mistake early in this mini-series in saying, we'll just do a quick flyby here and go into more detail in the webinar. The webinar is going to be like 30 to 60 minutes, somewhere in there. We're not going to cover as much in the actual webinar as we have in these episodes. But join because we're going to have some cool downloads for you, as I said, as well. So some guidance that makes it nice and easy to walk you through the step-by-step process, gives you some idea of how to set your agenda, but also it's a chance to have that discussion. So that's why having that recording available afterwards is going to be handy. But the other thing is that if you're there and the rest of your committee aren't, then that's a really easy thing to share with them. I suggest, however, if you do watch the recording of the webinar, that you don't put it on 1.5 or 2 times speed, because Steve talks fast enough at one
to
time
try and get
speed.
everything into the 30 or 40 minutes. Yes.
Yes. So definitely register and you'll have access to that webinar. Thank you, of course, to Jess, our wonderful producer and editor, who I say makes us sound better than we do, but Steve, we're just almost perfect.
Too far gone. I was going the other way.
I like it. I like it. Make sure you're following us on all of the social channels and subscribe to our newsletter on our website so you can stay in the know about all the good stuff that we're talking about. You'll find all of the links in the description of this episode to everywhere you need to go. But if you're driving and you don't want to look at that, I'm sure you'll be able to remember cprgroup.com.au. And if you want to register for the webinar, it's the same thing, cprgroup.com.au and slap a slash webinars on the end of it. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to follow the podcast on whatever platform you listen on, so that way you won't miss out on any of the fantastic episodes that we've got coming up. Of course, this is now that we're wrapping up and another of our little mini-series. We hope you're enjoying all of the episodes, and of course, we want to keep improving what we're doing so that we can bring even more valuable episodes to you. So one way that you can help us to do that is to share the love. So you can help even more like-minded people like you and like us simply by leaving us a quick review on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts on. Now, Steve, you know how reviews make you feel when you get that lovely little 5-star review and a winky smiley face. They make us feel all happy and cheery, but they also play a really important role in helping others to discover our show. And, you know, I was going to say we don't do this for us, but I think there is an element of that because it is fun talking about basket case. And sometimes it's not fun at the time, but then looking back on it, you go, That really was an absolute basket case shit show. So I'm glad that it's behind us, and I'm glad now that we can laugh about it.
And we can all learn from it.
And everyone can learn from it, more importantly. So if you do, or not if, when you do leave us a review, you can mention your favorite episode or what it is that you like when we talk about, because that'll give us some feedback as well to make sure that we're on the money when it comes to what you need to get out of these. And of course, as we mentioned, as a token of our appreciation, we're going to be giving away some swag, some Basket Case Club's swag. And here's my little drink bottle as I take a drink out of my Basket Case Club's drink bottle. So refreshing. Basket Casey refreshingness. So yes, but you do have to leave us a review between now and sometime soon. So keep listening, keep learning, and of course, keep enjoying the journey with us. Thanks again for all of your support. Steve, thank you to you for contributing such wonderful insights and such Basket Casey stories to all of these episodes. As usual, it is always a pleasure to have these chats with you.
And it's my pleasure to rant at you.
And
to be hosted, yes.
So, all right, and it's my pleasure to be a rantee if you're the rantor. Thanks, everyone, and see you next time.
See you later. Basket Case Clubs acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country on which we record, being Yugambeh, Turrbal, Jagera and Kabi Kabi land. We recognise their enduring connection to land, waters and culture, and pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to First Nations listeners.